All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we are jumping into a story that kicks off with a very modern scandal, but you'll see it ends with a timeless truth about who we really are.
Okay, let's get right into it with a question that has haunted art lovers for ages. But, well, recently it became something an entire country just couldn't ignore.
The hashtag #MeToo movement, right? It sent shockwaves everywhere. And in South Korea, just like in so many other places, it brought these really troubling accusations against some very powerful people to light. It forced a difficult and frankly long overdue public conversation about power, art, and accountability.
And there's probably no better or more painful example of this conflict than the case of one of South Korea's most celebrated and beloved poets.
So, on the one hand, you've got Ko-eun. This guy is a literary giant. He's considered a national treasure. He's always in the running for the Nobel Prize, and his poems are so popular, they've even been turned into famous songs. But then, on the other hand, multiple accusers came forward with these awful stories of misconduct and abuse of power. It creates this impossible dilemma. Can we, or maybe the better question is, should we separate the beautiful art from the deeply flawed artist?
And what this whole situation really drives home is that this art versus artist debate, it's not a new thing, not at all. In fact, if you look back, the history of art is just littered with these problematic geniuses.
Think about it. You go back to 19th century France, and you've got Arthur Rimbaud, this brilliant poet whose life was just one big scandal, including a really violent affair. Then you fast forward to the 20th century, and Jean Genet is literally writing his masterpieces from a prison cell. And this isn't just a Western thing either. The pattern exists everywhere, including in Korea with huge literary figures like Kim Dong-ni, whose personal life was every bit as dramatic as his writing.
So the fact that we keep having this same argument over and over again for centuries about all these different artists, it kind of makes you step back and ask a much bigger question, right? Why do we even care so much? What is it about this particular art form, made by both saints and sinners, that makes it last for so long? What even is poetry?
Well, to really get that, we have to go way, way back to the very beginning of how humans even started expressing themselves.
So what is it? Put simply, poetry is like the mother of all literature. It's the ancestor, the OG. Before we had novels, before we had plays, before we had screenplays, we had poetry. It was our first attempt to take language and make it into something powerful and permanent.
But why? Why was it first? Well, just think about it for a second. Before most people could write, how did you pass down your history, your stories of heroes and gods? You couldn't just hand someone a book. No, you made a chant, a verse, something with rhythm. That rhythm and rhyme acted like a piece of technology for your memory. It was also a community thing, bringing everyone together around a shared story. And on a spiritual level, people believed the gods were more likely to listen if your prayer was beautiful and rhythmic.
But here's where it gets really fascinating. This ancient need for rhythm, it goes deeper than just culture. It seems to be wired right into our biology, a direct link between the art form and our own bodies.
Yeah, that's right. The reason a good poem can hit you so hard, why it feels so primal, isn't just some dusty old tradition. It's because it's literally speaking a language our bodies already know.
This is absolutely incredible when you think about it. The meter of a poem, that beat, that duh-doom rhythm, it often syncs up with our own heartbeat. And the length of a line of poetry, so often it matches the natural length of one single breath. Inhale and exhale. So when you're taking in a poem, you're not just hearing words, your body is actually physically syncing up with it. It feels like life itself.
And you can trace this primal connection all through history. It never really left us, it just evolved. It started with ancient prayers and chants, right? Then it grew into these huge oral histories like the Iliad and the Odyssey. And where is it today? Well, it's in the art form we listen to constantly, song lyrics. Seriously, the words to your favorite song, they're just the newest link in this unbroken chain that goes back thousands and thousands of years.
And that brings us right back around to today. Because in our super-fast digital world, this ancient art form is making a huge and kind of surprising comeback.
Let's look at the haiku, for instance. It's an ancient Japanese form that's all about packing a massive punch of emotion and imagery into just a few syllables. Listen to this one. An old persimmon, a mother's forgotten youth, how tart it once was. Wow, that's an entire life story, a whole universe of feeling in a single breath.
And this is why poetry is having a moment right now.
Think about how we consume stuff today. A novel, right? That needs hours of deep immersion. A news article, a few minutes to get the facts. But poetry? It works just like a tweet. It's all about brevity. It's designed to hit you with a powerful, memorable feeling in just a few seconds. In our world of endless scrolling, poetry is the perfect art form. Maximum impact, minimum time. So when you boil it all down, whether it's written by a saint or a sinner, poetry is so much more than just something you study in school. It's fundamental to who we are. It's a technology for memory, it's the rhythm of our emotions, and maybe, just maybe, it's the best way to find a little bit of meaning in all the noise. Which leaves us with one last question for you to think about. In 280 characters or less, what's the poem of your life?
Today, we are decoding the power of poetry. And trust me, it might be way more relevant to your daily life than you ever thought. So, let's get into it.
Okay, so when I say the word poetry, what pops into your head? For a lot of us, it's something hopelessly complicated, that thing you had to dissect in school. Or maybe you picture the classic poet, that tragic, starving artist from way back when, who's a little gloomy, a little dramatic, and definitely not thinking about our world today.
But here's the thing. For basically all of human history, poetry has really just had two main jobs. The source material boils it down for us. First, pleasure. Just the sheer fun of it, the rhythm, the sound, that shared feeling it gives you. And second, insight, a kind of instruction that hits you with an unexpected truth and gives you a whole new way of looking at the world.
So, how in the world does poetry deliver that powerful insight? Well, it starts with a little jolt to your brain, a technique called cognitive shock. And yeah, it's designed to do exactly what it sounds like, shake you out of your everyday thinking.
This one, simple-looking line from the famous Korean poet Ji-yong is the perfect key to understanding this whole idea. He just looks at a horse and says, "Horse, you are so very sad."
Your first reaction is probably, wait, what? Horses aren't sad. They're strong, they're majestic. But that strange question is the entire point. It makes you stop and really look at something you thought you already knew everything about.
And then the poet kind of guides your eye. He points to the horse's long neck, but he reframes it. It's not a symbol of power anymore. Suddenly it looks fragile, delicate, maybe even a little lonely. He's changing how you see it, one detail at a time.
And then comes the emotional gut punch. The poet realizes that this horse, like almost any domesticated animal, will never, ever know its parents. It's a universal orphan. And right there, he connects the animal's life to a deeply human feeling. That feeling of being all alone in the world.
And that, right there, is cognitive shock. The poem takes something totally familiar, a horse, and makes it feel strange. It messes with our assumptions to show us a hidden universal truth. It's a technique that literally forces you to see the world with fresh eyes. So, what's the secret ingredient here? What's the engine that drives this cognitive shock? Well, it turns out it's a single, incredibly powerful tool. And the wild thing is, every single one of us uses it every single day.
We're talking way back, over 2,000 years ago. The philosopher Aristotle, he pinpointed this tool in his masterpiece Poetics. He argued that true genius wasn't about knowing a bunch of facts. Nope, it was about one specific skill, being a master of metaphor.
And at its heart, a metaphor isn't just some fancy literary device you learn in English class. Aristotle saw it as the actual foundation of all creative thought. It's the ability to see a hidden link between two things that seem totally unrelated, and by doing that, you create a brand new bridge of understanding.
And this shows just how deep this stuff goes. We use metaphors constantly without even realizing it. When you say, "I see what you mean," you're making a metaphor that connects physical sight with mental understanding, or time flies. Time doesn't have wings, right? We're comparing an abstract concept to a moving object. Even the Korean expression for being exhausted, nokchua, is a metaphor for a candle that's completely melted down. Perfect, right?
Now, to really see this tool in action, let's take a look at how it was used by three masters of Korean poetry. These poets used metaphor to capture the very heart of a nation during one of its most turbulent and painful times. So, in the world of modern Korean poetry, these three figures are absolute pillars. Kim So-wol is called the mother because his work is so emotional and easy to connect with. Ji-yong, yep, the sad horse guy we met earlier, is the father, known for his really powerful, sharp imagery. And then there's Yoon Dong-ju, who's seen as their tragic heir, a voice of conscience in a really dark time.
Yoon Dong-ju's story is it's heartbreaking. He wrote his most famous works while he was studying in Japan during the darkest days of World War II, which was a time of brutal colonial rule over Korea. He was arrested by Japanese authorities and died in prison at just 27 years old. He never got to see his work published or celebrated.
Actually, his masterpiece collection, Sky, Wind, Star, and Poem, only survived because of a total miracle. Yoon made 3 handwritten copies. 2 were lost. He gave the third one to a close friend. That friend, right before he was drafted into the army, gave the manuscript to his own mother. Get this, she hid it under the floorboards of their house for the rest of the war. His friend survived, came back, retrieved the poems, and they were finally published in 1948. They became a national treasure.
And this really brings us to the most important point here. This ability to create new connections, this way of poetic thinking, it's not something that's locked away in some dusty old book. It is a powerful way of thinking that's available to every single one of us.
A metaphor lets us connect things that seem totally separate. It's the thing that lets us build a bridge of empathy to another person, or even to an animal, just like the poet did with the horse. It's the engine of creativity that helps us find new solutions to old problems. Honestly, in a lot of ways, it's a fundamental tool for survival.
You know, the philosopher Ivan Illich, he had this idea of what he called convivial tools. These are simple, accessible things that are essential for human freedom. And his list had just 3 things on it: the library, the bicycle, and poetry. He didn't see poetry as a luxury, but as a basic human tool for making meaning out of the world.
And that's really our final thought. The true power of poetry isn't just about reading poems. It's about learning to think like a poet. It's about looking at the familiar world all around you and challenging yourself to see it differently. So the question for you is, what hidden connections are just waiting for you to find them today?
Today, we're going to look at 2 of Korea's most famous and beloved poems. Now, on the surface, they're just these beautiful, classic works of art. But if you dig just a little bit deeper, you find they might be hiding a secret language, one that speaks to some of our deepest, most primal instincts.
So let's start with a poem that, if you're Korean, you almost definitely know by heart. Kwang-soo, which means nostalgia, by the incredible poet Jeong. And if you don't know it, you're about to see why it's so famous. It just has this gorgeous lyrical quality that paints an unforgettable picture of a traditional Korean hometown. The poem kicks off with this incredibly serene image. I mean, when you hear those words, you can almost feel that sense of peace, right? The slow, gentle rhythm of village life. It's designed to feel instantly familiar, super comforting. It really is a perfect picture of longing for your home. But what if this beautiful scenery is actually a canvas for something much, much deeper? A more complex language about the human mind itself? Okay, let's really get into this. You see, the real genius of this poem isn't just the picture it paints, it's the poet's incredibly specific sensory language. He doesn't just describe a scene, he makes you feel it, he makes you hear it, he makes you live in it through his very precise choice of words. Okay, take this word for example. The stream doesn't just flow, it 지절되는. It's a word that's almost impossible to translate perfectly because it gives the water this gentle, living quality, like it's whispering secrets as it passes by. It's just an incredibly intimate sound. And it's not just the stream. Later, a golden calf isn't just crying in the evening. No, it's crying at 해살피, that very specific, hazy moment as the daylight just starts to fade into dusk. One single word instantly creates this dreamlike, almost melancholy vibe.
And this is just a brilliant move by the poet. He pulls us in with what feels like a classic cinematic zoom, right? We go from this wide, sprawling landscape right into the heart of the home. And here, the focus shifts to this very tender image, the father, the anchor of the family, finally getting some rest.
But the poem doesn't stay on the father for long. It pivots to two other powerful figures in the home, a sister and a wife. And as we're about to see, the way they are described is where the hidden language of this poem really starts to come out. Now, on the surface, these are just simple, loving descriptions, right? You've got the beautiful, almost mythical-looking sister, and then the hardworking, humble wife. They seem like these perfectly innocent portraits of family life.
But what if these images aren't just random details? Some literary analyses, especially the ones that look at poetry through a psychological lens, argue that they are anything but. The whole idea is that these specific details aren't just descriptions, they're actually symbols that tap into a deep, subconscious language of human desire.
Okay, so this psychoanalytic reading completely flips the poem on its head. From this point of view, the sister's long, flowing hair isn't just beautiful, it's a powerful, almost biological signal of femininity. And the wife's bare feet, well, they're seen not as a sign of a humble life, but as something way more complex, a fetish object. Now, in Freudian theory, this isn't just some sexual quirk. It's seen as a psychological symbol that helps a person deal with this deep-seated subconscious anxiety from childhood. All of a sudden, the poem is no longer just a sweet memory, it's a map of the subconscious mind.
Now, let's shift gears. We're going to move from the warm nostalgia of Jeong to the heartbreaking anguish of another literary giant, Yoon Dong-ju, a poet whose life was every bit as tragic as his words were beautiful. His work is just defined by this profound sense of conscience and suffering. He was writing during the darkest days of the Japanese colonial rule, and his poetry is just filled with the sense of personal responsibility and torment in a world that felt completely unjust. And tragically, his life really did reflect his poetry. He was imprisoned for his beliefs and died at just 27 years old. And there's strong evidence suggesting that he was subjected to horrific medical experiments in prison, his body used as a testing ground for who knows what.
And this is the crucial point. His poems, which are filled with these images of sacrifice, suffering, and a deep yearning for a clear conscience, they seem to eerily predict his own destiny. It's like he wrote his own fate into his verses without even knowing it. But what happens when we apply that same deep, psychoanalytic lens we used on nostalgia to Yoon Dong-ju's work? Well, the results are just as startling, and for a lot of people, way more controversial.
So the standard, and very beloved, interpretation sees this poem as a statement of faith, a willingness to be sacrificed for a greater cause, like the liberation of his nation. The cross is the ultimate symbol of martyrdom. But then this radical rereading from the late critic Kwang-soo comes along and completely flips that standard view. He argued the steeple isn't a symbol of hope, but of the superego. You can think of it as that judging, moral voice in our head, the one that enforces all of society's rules. And in this view, the man isn't tormented by colonial oppression, but by his own repressed desires. And the blood? It's not some noble sacrifice, but a violent release of that internal tension. A sadomasochistic fantasy. I mean, this interpretation completely changes the poem's meaning. It's no longer about a national hero preparing for this grand sacrifice. Instead, it becomes this deeply human and frankly universal story of a young man wrestling with the powerful forces of his own instincts versus the moral codes of society.
So where does that leave us? We have two of the most cherished poems in all of Korean literature, and for each one, we have at least two drastically different meanings. One is comforting and patriotic, and the other is deeply personal and pretty unsettling. What this shows us is that the most powerful art isn't about giving us simple, easy answers. It's about containing multitudes. A single poem can be both a beautiful landscape and a complex psychological diagram. It can be a patriotic anthem and, at the same time, a cry of personal torment. You see, their true power isn't in having one correct meaning. It lies in their infinite complexity. It's what keeps them alive. It allows every new reader and every new generation to find their own truths, their own anxieties, and their own hopes reflected in those same words.
And really, that's the big takeaway here. We often turn to art for comfort, for beauty, but maybe its most vital role is to challenge us, to make us look at the world and, more importantly, at ourselves in ways we never expected. The best art doesn't just give us answers, it leaves us asking way better questions.